We build cities for a reason, right? To be closer to opportunity, to innovation, to each other. But here's the crazy thing. For billions of people, cities deliver the exact opposite. We're talking inequality, pollution, isolation. It's this massive contradiction, and honestly, it's one of the biggest challenges we face. So today, let's dive into this great urban paradox and figure out what it means for all of our futures. And this quote, wow, it just nails it, doesn't it? Cities empower and circumscribe. It's from the journal Nature Cities, and it perfectly captures that tension we're talking about. Think about it. For every single person a city lifts up, gives them a new job, a fresh start, there's someone else who feels boxed in, limited, circumscribed by those very same systems. And this is where you can really see that massive gap between the promise and the reality. On one side, you've got the dream, right? The city as this shining beacon of opportunity, of connection. But then there's the other side, the reality for billions of people, which is all about scarcity and feeling totally alone. And, we can't even begin to fix this until we really truly understand this disconnect. Okay, so let's put a name on it. We're calling this the urban paradox. It's that constant and frankly growing gap between the city we want to build, that ideal, and the city people are actually living in and day out. And if we want to bridge that gap, we've got to understand it first. And believe me, nowhere is this paradox more real, more urgent than on the front lines of the climate crisis. This is really the first major battleground we need to look at, because it's where the future of our cities is literally being decided. Fires. Fire has always been this primal fear for cities, right? But in the world we live in now, a warming world, that threat is just getting worse. And listen, we're not just talking about wildfires way out on the edge of town. No, recent research is showing we can expect more and more vehicle fires, outdoor fires right in the middle of our streets. And it's not just fire either, it's floods. They're getting more frequent, more severe. But here's the crucial part. These disasters don't hit everyone equally, not by a long shot. A huge study looked at over 44,000 neighborhoods in South America, and what did it find? Communities with lower education levels got hit way, way harder by flooding. It's a perfect, tragic example of how climate change just pours gasoline on existing social problems. So, all of this brings us to a really big question, right? In the face of all these threats, how do we build resilience? How do we design cities that can actually protect everyone from what's coming? Well, one answer is pretty surprising, and it has to do with green space. Now, for years, we've all just assumed that when it comes to parks and trees, more is always better. Simple, right? But it turns out a massive study looking at 4 decades of research shows, well, it's a lot more complicated than that. Get this, it's a moderate dose of nature that gives us the biggest mental health boost. Yeah, you heard that right. Too little isn't great, obviously, but too much green space can actually be less effective. It's kind of like a Goldilocks situation. And it's such a powerful reminder that the best solutions aren't always the most obvious ones. We have to follow the evidence, not just our gut feelings. And that whole idea that climate disasters don't hit everyone the same, that points to an even deeper truth about our cities. The fact is, within every single city, there are really 2 cities. 2 completely different experiences depending on who you are. And this brings us to the second dimension of our urban paradox. So how do we wrap our heads around this division? Well, the best way is through one simple, really powerful idea: lines. Sometimes these lines are physical, things you can actually see. Think about railway lines in Tokyo. They can literally determine whether you see ads for sustainable food or junk food every single day. Or look at the electrical grid in Kampala. The lines are there running through the city, but they just bypass the most vulnerable people, leaving them in the dark. But these lines can also be invisible, like the hidden barriers that separate women from life-saving childbirth care in Guinea, or the growing divides in who gets access to clean water in major U.S. cities. And you know what's wild? We're creating new lines of inequality all the time, even with things we think are just making life easier. Food delivery is a perfect example. For you, the consumer, it's amazing, right? You get to stay inside, out of the extreme heat. It's pure convenience. But that climate risk, that heat exposure, it doesn't just vanish. It gets transferred directly onto the delivery rider. So your convenience literally becomes their vulnerability. And of course, all that convenience is powered by technology. Which brings us to our third big piece of this paradox. The whole digital transformation of our cities, it's a total double-edged sword. On one hand, it holds incredible promise, but on the other, there are some serious dangers. So it makes you wonder, right? Is all this technology actually making our cities better for everyone? Or is it just making them different? I mean, the potential is just huge. You've got AI and large language models that could totally revolutionize city planning. We're talking about analyzing insane amounts of data, automating all the tedious, complex stuff, and building these amazing interactive tools that help leaders make smarter, faster decisions about things like climate resilience. But then there's the reality. Take a look at this. This is data from 10 major U.S. cities. And what it shows is that the number of surveillance cameras is always higher in neighborhoods with more racial diversity. And here's the kicker. When white residents start moving into those neighborhoods, the number of cameras shoots up even more. What does this tell us? It tells us that technology is never neutral. It acts like a mirror. It doesn't just reflect our best intentions for a safer city. It reflects, and a lot of times it actually amplifies, the biases that are already there in society. Okay, so where do we go from here? We've talked about climate, inequality, technology, and it seems like our old ways of thinking just aren't cutting it. That gap isn't closing. So maybe the answer isn't just about finding new tools. Maybe we need entirely new ways of seeing the city itself. Let's start with what you might call the rooftop view. You know that feeling when you're high up, looking down on a city, and all of a sudden it clicks. You don't see a bunch of separate problems anymore. You see one single, living, breathing system where every little piece is connected to everything else. And then there's the 24-hour view. Think about it. So much of how we plan and study cities is focused on the 9-to-5 world. But cities don't just shut down at dusk. There's this whole hidden life after dark, a rhythm that we absolutely have to understand if we're going to have any hope of managing these places well. And once you start looking at the city at night, the things you find are honestly, they're fascinating. You discover that all our artificial lights are actually making the growing season longer for plants in the city. You have citizen scientists out there mapping light pollution block by block. You can look at bank data and see these hidden economic patterns that only show up after the sun goes down. It's like a whole other city hiding in plain sight. So when you boil it all down, if we're serious about solving this urban paradox, about finally closing that gap between the dream of the city and the reality, we can't just keep doing the same old things. We have to fundamentally change how we look at the problem. We need new perspectives. Because in the end, cities don't just build themselves. They're a reflection of us, of all of us. They show our greatest hopes, our deepest fears, our hidden biases, everything. So the only real question left is, what do we want them to say about us tomorrow?